Our panel. Our panel. It's about us.
Welcome back to our panel. We are in season 2, episode 3 of our panel. Thank you so much for joining. I'm your host, Dr. Crystal Redmond, and I'm joined here by my 2 amazing co-hosts and co-panelists, Dr. Rose and Dr. Q. Thank you so much for being here again.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. And, something that we're speaking about today is a very fragile conversation, a very sensitive topic, and it's around mental health and suicide amongst our young folks. So before you view this episode, I just want to alert you to some of the information here being a bit sensitive, and consider that as you are viewing our episode today. So let's get into the conversation. I know that when we started thinking about our season 2 and the issue areas we wanted to uplift and address, we spoke about the state of America. What is going on in our country? What are the things that continue to happen and the things that have shifted a bit? Not much has shifted outside of the last time we filmed our panel. So in season 1, which we filmed, I want to say at the end of 2019, we went through a huge pandemic, COVID, but we also went through another pandemic, and we're still actively living in both pandemics, is the increase of anti-Black racism. And not necessarily increase of anti-Black racism, because anti-Black racism has always been there, an increase, but I guess it was an increased exposure on a larger platform for anti-Black racism on social media, on the news outlets, and there was this racial uproar as we navigated especially the last 3 years. There was a lot of activism around anti-Black racism, police brutality, etc. And we became almost very desensitized to Black and brown trauma and the constant attacks on our bodies. So the question is, what does that do to our mental health as a community, not just as a community, but also including our youth, right? Every time we open up our social media accounts, we see another attack, these Karen attacks or whatnot, they labeled it, right? And so here's another this and such. And even though it's a hashtag, these things truly affect our lives. They affect the ways in which we navigate the world, etc. So that's why we decided to uplift mental health issues as one of the topics for this episode, because it is a constant state of emergency in America, and we're not truly addressing mental health as a community. So let's get into some of the data and statistics around mental health and suicide, to be quite honest.
So as you shared, mental health has impacted the Black community like never before. Mm-hmm. And some of the reasons behind it is that we experience systemic racism at rates greater than any other racial ethnic group. We don't have access to mental health services and other healthcare services, poverty, as well as discrimination. Mm-hmm. I don't think people understand the impact that discrimination has on Black and brown people in our country. And when we're talking about the impact, we're talking about people attempting or successfully completing a suicide. And that part to me is really devastating. When we think about Black people, Black young people ages 10 to 24 are at an increased risk for suicide attempts, and they actually are have the leading cause of death. The second leading cause of death for those individuals is suicide. Wow. So ages 10 to 24, the second leading cause is suicide. And when we think about our Black men versus Black women, Black men are 3 times more likely to commit suicide in comparison to Black women. And we need our Black men. Mm-hmm. We need to address what's going on so that whatever they're experiencing, someone somewhere is able to intervene. And then Black people as a whole are 20% more likely to experience a mental health condition and have feelings of worthlessness, anxiety, and other mental health conditions. And suicide, I need folks to understand, it's not a personal failure or weakness. It really is a complex and often preventable public health issue that doesn't get enough attention. And so I'm happy that we've created this space to talk about mental health in the Black community. And when we think about our Black and brown transgender community, 1 in 4 Black trans reported a suicide attempt in the past year. And that statistic, to me, is really appalling and really shines a light on why we need to address mental health. But speaking of mental health, what's going on with our young people in mental health?
Yes, nearly 65% of our youth is reporting traumatic experiences. And to be honest, I really think it's coming from social media. Not primarily, but our youth is in TikTok, Snapchat, schools. We just talked about the school shooting. So a lot of them are comparing themselves to people they think is perfect. That there's a lot of bullying going on these social media platforms, and also within our own communities, they're seeing, hearing, and witnessing things that they shouldn't have to deal with in their childhood. And to add on, there's only less than 2% of mental health professionals out there that are minorities, and it's a healthcare disparity. And I think that us as a community, we need to start setting our boundaries, saying no, saying I need time for myself, giving ourselves just a corner just to have time for ourselves, but also not thinking productivity is success. The more we do, the better things are going to be. But just tallying your day, say, okay, I only could get 3 things done, and I don't have to say I worked 20-hour shift and I just got something done. So a lot of people just think productivity, and that's bringing so much stressors into our life because we are built to just work through things, and we aren't setting boundaries for ourselves. And I think that really will help mental health.
Absolutely. Busyness does not equal productivity.
Absolutely.
At all. And the thing you said too as well is like social media, right? And it's not just social media as a platform and how we engage people, but it's also access to information, like which is a double-edged sword,
and
right?
Misinformation.
Yeah, and misinformation too as well. It's a double-edged sword, as we said when we opened this episode. Constantly when you open up your phone on a daily basis or whatnot, you see another attack. Another, something else. There's always something, that's happened to this child, or this is going on, police brutality and all these different things. This many people died from the pandemic. And it's a constant trauma that we're pouring into ourselves, right? And then we're expected to just, okay, go to work. Let's be real. Millions of people died over the last 3 years, specifically due to COVID. And, let's go back to work. Lockdown's over, go back to work, go back to school, be a parent, be all there emotionally, and just be a productive member of society. But we have not, as a collective community, really had a chance to sit with this and figure out how do we really address our mental health, our emotions, not just for ourselves, but our families, etc. Right? And I love what you said about setting boundaries, just saying no. And no is a full sentence.
Absolutely.
Right. Oh, can you? No.
Right. Will you? No.
Right. Exactly, for sure. And I think because we're expected, especially as Black folks, to hold all the things, to balance all the things and balance it for other people too, and push through, because we push through so much that I think even within our community, not forget, but we find it taboo to really sit and address some of this trauma, and figuring out how this trauma affects us in our day-to-day life and in our relationships with other people, and how we parent and how we show up, etc. So I'm really happy today to invite a guest, because who said that 2% of, we have less than 2%. Yeah. We have less than 2% of our mental health providers who are BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color, right? And so we have the luxury and the privilege to have a guest here today that makes up that 2%, that's within that 2%. So I'm happy to introduce our next guest, Shauna Fleming, who is a licensed master social worker and has been in the mental health field for over 15 years and has experience in working with many diverse communities. Welcome, Shauna.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I am well.
You look amazing.
Thank you
for
so
being
much.
here.
Absolutely. So in honor of May being Mental Health Awareness Month, I have provided you all with a journal.
Oh my gosh,
It's called Win Within. I created it. It helps to reduce depression, anxiety, and boost self-awareness.
Girl, give me that book.
Wonderful. Why? Give me the book for sure. I'm like about to open it right now. I love this. And wait, it matches with our logo too as well. So this is beautiful.
Perfect.
So hopefully once we actually launch our episodes, maybe we can have a link to this on our website, or at least on our Instagram, so people have access to this resource.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much for bringing that. And thank you for being here.
I'm so excited.
Yes, and also, thank you for being a part of that 2% of Black and brown folks that make up the mental health professionals in our communities. I hope that as we grow as a community and increased need is met or can be met by more providers with parallel identities, right?
For sure.
So tell us a little bit about what you're seeing when it comes to mental health and suicide amongst Black and brown folks.
Absolutely. So I know earlier you all talked about statistics, but I have seen, especially since COVID has happened, we've definitely seen an uptick in completed suicides amongst Black and brown people. And it's really unfortunate because oftentimes we don't create conversations around mental health. It's not really existent in our conversations amongst us until there's a problem. And so my solution to remedy that is to really start valuing mental health in the way that we value dental appointments, any other kind of physical screening. We're gonna check on it to make sure that we don't have issues that mushroom and then we have to solve them. So we wanna take more of a proactive approach as opposed to a reactive approach.
So really prioritizing mental health like we do physical health and other aspects of our health.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So speaking of mental health, what does high functioning depression look like, especially in Black and brown people?
Absolutely, that's an excellent question. I've been asked that several times. So the way that I describe high functioning depression and what it looks like for us, considering a lot of times as Black and brown people, we have this expectation for us to remain strong. And so that carries over with our diagnosis as well. And so with high functioning depression, what it looks like, someone has skillfully mastered looking okay, when deep down they're not okay. And so what happens is when they skillfully master that, they tend to not get help, so they continue to be depressed. So, I mean, it's unfortunate, and it's something that we definitely need to make sure we're addressing head on to
really prevent this from being like a bigger situation, because mental health can lead to a number of things, such as suicide. So
absolutely.
That's really important to know, is that high functioning depression would look like just an everyday person that's okay.
That's it.
And Sean, I have a question. What is code switching and how does it affect our mental health?
That's good.
Absolutely. So code switching is the concept that we're in a certain space where we show up in order to seek someone else's approval. And so we're showing up in a fashion that really doesn't align with who we are, which can cause some internal conflict. And so we have a term in psychology that's called cognitive dissonance, and it's basically when we behave in a certain manner that doesn't truly align with who we are. And so that can be unfortunate because we're really neglecting a part of who we are.
That's right.
Wow.
That's heavy, because I definitely feel like I do that in my day-to-day life.
Yes.
Listening to trap music on the way to corporate America, and when I get there, it's, hi everyone, I'm Dr. Rose. So I definitely understand, and I could see the impact that that could have on someone's mental health, having to almost be two different people in one.
That's right. That's right. And I feel like there's different ways that anxiety and depression can look even within our communities, as you said, right?
Absolutely.
So if someone does maybe have depression and is, Black, brown, indigenous, can that actually just look like us being smiley, happy, performative, doing all the normal things in our lives?
Absolutely. So again, it's one of those things, especially because I work in a men's prison. And so for men specifically, depression looks totally different. They're hard, they have this masculine approach, everything's all good. No, I'm straight, it's all good.
Yeah.
But then they come into my office and they bust out crying. So because that's a space that I allow them to be vulnerable. Absolutely. So it definitely looks different, male to female. Females, Black females specifically, a lot of times have to keep it together, so to speak, or we feel like we have to keep it together because we actually don't, but somehow we're pushed in areas where we feel like we do. And so again, I tell people one of the important things about healing is getting to know who you are. And that's one of the reasons about this journal is really to really empower yourself based on getting to know who you are, getting in alignment with your feelings, your emotions, things like that, so we can genuinely be who we are as opposed to what we're told to be.
So basically everything starts with yourself.
That's it.
That's how you could help others, or that's how you could raise your children and help your community, but you have to start internally and do something like journaling.
And the name of the journal, Win Within, like you can't win until you start within.
That's it.
That's strong.
That's
So
it.
That's amazing. So what are some strategies that we can tell our community to really help us improve our mental health?
Absolutely. So one of the things that I do like to acknowledge with communities of color, number one, we use something called the empowerment model, and it does a couple of things. Number one, it addresses the oppression of marginalized communities, which makes us feel like we have a space where we're validated. And then number two, it also allows us to have autonomy and develop more healthier ways of being based on kind of being in control of our own lives.
Yeah.
And so I tell people a lot of times you want to develop a community around you of people that are similar to you so you can have that voice, you can have that support, what have you. So that's one of the things that I find that helps. And also we have to learn how to change our self-talk. I tell people a lot of times, especially working with inmates, a lot of times, excuse me, I don't like to use the word inmates.
Correct, yeah.
Individuals incarcerated, they're person first. A lot of times changing our self-talk. That's the key. I think a lot of times we come from a place where we are so used to talking to ourselves in this really not fragile manner. We really kind of are hard on ourselves. So giving ourselves a little bit more grace. All right, so there's an acronym called ACT, and it stands for Acceptance and Commitment Therapy. And these are basically skills where people are learning to.
I'm sorry, I actually have to stop you right there because I don't know if you all can hear the sirens and the helicopters or what have you as we're taping, but we're in downtown Atlanta, and right down the street, there's an active shooter at Northside Hospital. And I think it's directly related to this topic, but also episode 2, we spoke about mass shootings and such, specifically within a multitude of different communities, but also within our communities. And being in downtown Atlanta, our demographics are predominantly Black and brown. So when you hear the sirens and such, it's not just, a hospital siren. There's actually a mass crisis, shooting crisis going on right down the street or so, which is a lot. And it affects our mental health because even as we're sitting here trying to have the conversation, we don't even know if we can leave this studio or where this, or what's going on or what have you. And we're talking, we're expected to continue on the conversation and speak about our mental health when, as I said, we're part of community and we're actively trying to, would this be considered code switching too as well? Like even within here, like, okay, let's just put our, put our best face forward and such as our front, our persona, and such, because what we truly want to do, what I want to do right now is kind of cry, that something's going on that directly affects people in our community.
Absolutely.
This is really heavy. Especially as we're speaking about these topics. That's just wow. Oh goodness. So I feel like it might be a good place to kind of just take care of ourselves, practice some of that, self-care, being very intentional about, when and where we show up and when we have to just say no.
Absolutely.
And such. So my apologies for interrupting you. No. And do you mind that I wrap up? And
that is totally fine.
And then how about you all? Are you feeling okay to wrap up?
Yes, it's time to go.
Okay, well, and this is the realities of our communities.
Absolutely.
This is why we have this conversation. This is why we've created this intentional space, because we're constantly getting sick, we're dying, we're being attacked. We constantly are subject to hearing and seeing or living through these very traumatic experiences. So our panel advises you to please just take care of yourself, take care of your loved one. We will have the resource at our panel TV. And right now we're going to take care of ourselves and we're going to practice what we preach. So you all take care, and until next time, bye-bye.